The Rhode Island Foundation, partnering with passionate Rhode Islanders to lead, transform, and inspire our state. Learn more at rhodeislandfoundation.org.
Welcome to another segment of In Another Opinion, a public information program where our discussions are focused on the communities of color in the state of Rhode Island. I'm your host, Peter Wells. My guests today are Commissioner of Public Safety Stephen Pare and Major Oscar Perez of the Providence Police Department. Today's topic, the Community Safety Act, Reform or Restraint. Let's kick it around a little bit, but before we get that, and I just have a question for you. Do you think, in your opinion, that the relationship between the community and the police department has improved?
I think it has improved over the years. I think it continues to get better. I think we have to work at it. And one of the initiatives that most recently was undertaken by the Providence Police is having a major dedicated to be the liaison to the community. So Major Oscar Perez, who is grew up here in the city, and wasn't born here, but came to this city and is really a Providence young man. Now he's in our top ranks of the Providence Police. We've focused, a unit in which he's overseeing to build a better relationship with the community. I think here in Providence, we have a real good relationship with our community. It can improve when we see other cities and what they've gone through, whether it's post-Ferguson and Baltimore. You didn't see that type of violence hit the streets of Providence. And I attributed that to our relationship with our community leaders. So there's an opportunity to have that discussion when there's pent-up anger against the police. If there's not an outlet, a real true outlet where they're being heard, then you see violence on the street. So I think it's improving, and I think we need to continue to improve.
What about you, Major? What do you think? What's your feeling?
I agree with the commissioner, the relationships. I got on the job in the 90s, and like the commissioner said, I was an immigrant who came from another country at a very young age. I was 14, so I was pretty much an educational product of the city of Providence. I've been able to see how policing has changed since the 90s where I came on. We've always embraced the community police concept. The police department, we have great men and women on the job who really embrace that concept and really take pride in serving our citizens in the city. That being said, we're constantly improving our relationships and creating things to make that even better, to the point that, my phone doesn't stop and it's not just me. I get it from officers, I get it from people in the community. If there's an issue that's not being resolved, we're a community ourselves, and we have many communities within the city of Providence. So sometimes maybe the services that they're expecting may not be to what they expected, and that's why we're here with this unit, to make sure that if there's something that is affecting whoever it is, that we can find some type of results to resolve that and to even create a better relationship within the department and within our communities.
Is there a specific name for the unit?
Yes, Community Relations Unit.
Okay, very good.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So if a citizen wants to get in touch with you or someone they just call in and ask for the Community Relations Unit.
Correct. And as many times I get a lot of referrals too, just for the point that it'll be from officers or from people in the community themselves. If there's anything, they'll reach out to me personally, right to my cell phone. Just before we came here on set today, I got a phone call in the police car about someone who wanted us to attend the meeting. There's meetings, there's fairs, there's principals at schools. There's just so much. Like I said, there's so many different communities within the city of Providence, from different cultural groups, from different entities, from the youth, from the homeless, and that's why we're here to serve them.
Very good, very good. So let me throw a just general question at you and just get your feedback. Do you support the CSA, or at least the sense of what it's about?
Yeah, I do. Now, the CSA was introduced as an ordinance almost 4 years ago. I did not support that ordinance that was submitted. we worked over the years intermittently, and most recently, a lot of the issues that we have raised from the police department's perspective have been either changed or language was added to satisfy that we're not going to be tying the hands of our police officers. And so it is changed, and there's a lot of lack of knowledge about what the CSA does and what it doesn't do. But and so you've seen the council take it up. It got voted out of committee. It was voted 12-0 on first council, and then it was tabled a couple of weeks ago for sort of a review and an oversight, and we expect that to move forward. And we've sat down, or we are about to sit down with that oversight committee to look at what needs to be tweaked and changed. I've spoken to the union, I've met with the union and the law department, so we just have to work out a few things, but I think going forward, as it is right now, I support it. Going forward, there may be some amendments and changes that can only improve it.
I would imagine, since it's community-based and it kind of reinforces the relationship to some degree between the police department and the community. I imagine, Major, you might be in support of at least the intent of what the Community Safety Act is about.
Yep, I'll tell you this. I think that I've been on the job for so many years, like I said, and then there's a lot of things, some great things that we have done in the past few years. A lot of great things, and a lot of that stuff that the Community Safety Act mentions, we're doing already to the extreme. So that being said, yeah, the intent is right. I agree with you. I just think that it's got to be sent so that the whole community in the city of Providence is not affected. Because we have, like I said earlier, we have so many different communities in the city, and are they on the table too? So we have to make sure that everybody's being served.
Sure, I understand. So in staying with that line of thought, what segments of the CSA do you feel might be over the top, overreach?
So, I mean, initially it was criminalizing our police officers. So in 2014, it actually had criminal sanctions for police officers not following the ordinance. I am adamantly opposed to that. That got taken out. There are a whole lot of other things. So let's talk about where it is right now before the council. You know, some of the sort of tweaks and looking at our gang database, for instance. The process in which somebody gets into a gang database and the disclosure of who's in there, there's got to be some understanding about the intent of the CSA. What we don't want to do is decimate a gang database, a tool that the Providence Police use very effectively. And look, I'll brag about them. We haven't had a gang-related homicide in all of 2016. We haven't had a homicide in 2017. They do phenomenal work in preventing. We don't want to break something that's not broken, and I don't think that's the intent at all with the CSA, but I understand the bigger picture of being fair, where if someone's in the gang database and they really don't belong, we don't want them in either. So it gives, some transparency, and there are some, there is like 60 different elements of the CSA that, are affected as we implement them. And a lot of those real difficult issues, gang database, consent to search, all those things, documenting when we do perform a search, regardless of its outcome, those are some changes to our systems that we have to build in. But overall, it's a piece that I believe is to build a better relationship. Look, I was around when the racial profiling bill was passed in the state. That was, a decade ago or 15 years ago. Racial profiling still exists.
Yep.
A law is not going to change it. A culture will. And the CSA is a law, but really, it's just words on a paper in which we have to follow. But really changing the culture really changes behavior.
Sure.
And one of the things the CSA addresses, and this police department has embraced, is body cams. First, in the Northeast, a large metropolitan Police Department agreeing to take body cams. Look, it's coming across the country. We'll see body cams on every police officer in America
Yes.
in a period of time. People expect it, and it's good for policing. So there's a lot of components to the CSA. We're good and can manage. It'll create a demand for additional resources in both personnel to manage, because it'll require a lot of reporting, right? And also some resources to build a system in order for us to comply.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's talk about this gang piece for a minute. What gets a person on the gang list?
So there's a criteria. There's a 10 item criteria. So, and we're going to publicize that policy. You know, it's like any intelligence. Why do we suspect an individual doing, bad things, whatever that may be? And so there's going to be a set criteria that we will go through. There'll be a pointing system where if, varying, tattoos that are indicative of gang affiliation, your prior criminal record and the timing of that, information that you're carrying a weapon and you're affiliated and running with a gang. Those are all things that are spelled out in our policy. Will then put you on a gang database.
Is there any age requirement or any difference as an age factor?
No, there's no age. A juvenile can go on. We agreed if we put a juvenile in the gang database, we'll give their parent or their guardian notification that this individual is in our gang database. That's one of the things that are required in the CSA. So, typically we have people that are 16 to 30 years old, sometimes a bit older, but that's really the scope. We don't have 12 and 11 and 13-year-olds in gang databases, but perhaps 15 or 16 you'll see some.
Okay. Major, have you had any interaction with the gangs?
Yes, yeah, I was a member of the gang unit for years as a young detective in the Youth Service Bureau. So I have, yes, I have the interaction. Unfortunately, a lot of these kids that join these gangs are it's because of sometimes they become victims of their own environment. Look out through the city. There's just so many different reasons why they may join it. That was a part of an investigation when someone actually was charged with murder at a very young age. Again, growing up in our neighborhood where it was predominantly a gang environment, and he joined, and then ended up being charged. So yeah, I was part of it. You see that happening, it kind of hurts you. That's why I always wonder, we come up with all these different things, but what are we doing for the youth? What are we doing for them so to make sure that they stay off those things and joining those gangs and socializing with those individuals that are full members? So that's sometimes what I wonder about, yes.
Yeah, well, Steve and I have talked about it in the past, about PAL programs and things of that nature to improve community relations, especially with young people, because I think the more they interact with police officers, the more they're comfortable with them, and the less there is to oppose activities. One of the things, I guess, that the CSA focuses on is on traffic stops. And I guess the community has expressed a concern that traffic stops, not necessarily racially profiled, but just traffic stops in general, overbearing, that, people get stopped and for no reason whatsoever. So one of the factors in this act that they're proposing is that the officers explain to a pedestrian or whatever why they're being stopped before they start asking questions for identification and yada, yada, yada. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, that's a best practice across the country. Like, I don't care what your race is, what your gender is. And don't you, as a citizen of this country, driving down the road, and if you're stopped by a California police officer or a Providence police officer, regardless of what you're doing, isn't it more professional that that police officer tells you immediately, ma'am, sir, I stopped you for speeding. I stopped you for the stop sign. I stopped you,
right.
Right from the jump. If we do that and are more consistent, then people don't wonder, why was it that I was stopped? Was it because I'm black? Was it because it's 2 in the morning? Was it because I have 4 other people in the car?
Or I'm in the wrong neighborhood,
or
or
I'm
whatever.
in the wrong. Yeah, all those things end up going through someone's mind, and unless there's an officer safety, we should, as American policing, be telling people on stops of motor vehicles, this is the reason why you were stopped. Now, there'll be some pushback about, well, maybe it's not the best tactic. I need to get a license, registration, insurance card first, because I don't want to start arguing with the motorists that, no, I wasn't speeding, no, I didn't go through the stop sign.
Right.
And we've found across the country that doesn't happen, and there's tactics if the motorist wants to debate the validity of that violation, there's a process for that. But it just tells people the reason why that officer stopped you, and we should be doing it every time, unless, obviously, under severe circumstances in which the officer's life, and it's going to be dangerous to do that. But those are extreme cases. I don't see that as being a big deal. I see it as a change in our both training and our practice, which takes us a little bit of time to get our officers to practice that best practice.
What about, rather than necessarily a police a stop in a vehicle, we don't do stop and search here, I know, but what about when a police officer is walking down the street or sees some youngsters or even adults acting suspicious, whatever that might be? How do you handle those kind of street stops, if you will?
So our men and women are well trained, Providence Police, and I say that with pride. I've been through several trainings throughout this country, nation, LA, Baltimore, and it's interesting to when members of other departments speak, and we're there, and I provide examples as far as how we interact with the youth on stops. We do it so well as far as de-escalating, diffusing, in those encounters. So that being said, yeah, so when we see a group of juveniles maybe in certain areas of the city, which unfortunately we do have some hot spots in the city, and at those times you may come up on a group of kids or youth that are maybe there because they live there, whatever the case may be. And many times, mind you, the officers may already have a relationship with this youth. So they may not necessarily be stopping because they want to start checking them just for interaction, just what's going on. Everything good, guys. It's a moment to actually create better relationships, and also a moment to let them know that we're around in case there is something going on where they themselves could be victims of another group coming by. So we deal with those situations in that manner. If we do get a call, because our neighbors do call sometimes and say, there's something that's going on in this corner, can you send an officer? And if that's the case, then based on our training, based on our policies, based on our rules and regulations, we'll conduct that stop. And then we'll move on. And if there's parents or anyone in that group that may have a question as far as why we came, more than likely, like the commissioner just stated, we'll take the monument because of best practice to explain why. I mean, we do it constantly. And I say this because I mean, half of my career has been in patrol. I've been a member of the gang unit. I was in juvenile detectives. I was a sergeant in detectives, a sergeant in narcotics. So I've seen those encounters. And not all encounters sometimes become those positive encounters. But at the end, all our sergeants, lieutenants know that we have to leave to make sure that our community understands why we did A, B, and C, so that they don't go home thinking like, they came by and did A, B, and C because of this. No, we want to make sure that everyone's happy, and that's why we have numbers. That's why we have internal affairs. So yeah, those happen, and we just want to make sure that those encounters end up with a positive result.
Very good. One more area that I'd like to cover on this CSA is the issue that, and it's been somewhat controversial around the country. It's the cameras, the body cameras that the police will be wearing, and I know that you and I talked, Steve, and there's some 250 already on the street that have these body cameras. And the use and when they're supposed to be on and not. And then the other side of the coin is pedestrians, people who have their cell phones out, taking pictures of police performing their duties. What you say about those particular situations? Yeah,
so body cams, I think, are really a tool in which policing in America is really going to embrace, because as we see now, everyone has an iPhone or a phone that's able to record both video and audio. And we'll go to a crash, just a simple crash, and people on the sidewalk are running their iPhones and their video just for whatever reason, to see if anything happens, I guess. So I've been a proponent, and this administration under Mayor Elorza has been embracing. We ought to proactively put body cams because it's going to protect our officers.
Right.
So if you see the whole, situation from beginning, then the interaction, and then at the end, it tells the whole story.
Exactly.
And it's going to give you one perspective, but we don't have that now. We only have the 10-second ugliness of police use of force. And it's startling when you look at police using force, because it will always be startling, right?
Sure.
It's physical. But if you see the entire, from the start to the finish, I think, and we've seen throughout the country, it only protects police officers. It changes the behavior on both sides of the camera when someone knows they're being audioed and videoed. And it was indicative of our pilot program we did last year with our 10 officers, and the 10 officers embraced them. Now, everyone's not going to like it, because you have a video and audio, and it's going to be different for police officers here in Providence. We get that. We understand that. There's discretion in which you turn it on and off. We understand, all the policies as well. This is the best practice. When you're in a private situation and that person doesn't want to be audioed and video, by the way, we tell them, we give them notice verbally that you're being audioed and videoed. So everyone knows this isn't about catching you on candid camera. This is about documenting our interactions all the time on the street. I only see it as positive, but we're going to go through some training, and we're going to go through some resistance about, hey, when do I put it on? When don't? You got to use good judgment, good common sense. Hey, err on the side of, I'm taping unless I really think I shouldn't be for whatever reason. I think it just protects us all the way around. When the public demands, I want to see it and hear it, because they don't believe, people's testimony today.
Yeah. Have you ever run into the situation, Major, where someone is video cam with a cell phone?
Yes. Yeah, all the time. All the time it happens.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's great. I think it's actually it's something that is needed, like the commissioner just stated. It's an extra tool for the police officers, and it's a change. It's a change in policing. It's coming. We're all about being transparent. We're better by being transparent than by having a camera on you. And you're going to catch exactly what's occurring. I've been videotaped. I've handled a lot of protests throughout the city. There's on YouTube. You mentioned it's there. Many times I've been videotaped and then they denied that the tape wasn't around. So and I wish at that moment I had my own camera. So I think it could be a great tool for our officers, our men and women. And like I said, we're all being transparent. We're not hiding anything. We're not perfect. I mean, there's no families nowhere. There's no business that's perfect. But we do our best to be perfect.
But Peter, let me add, this isn't to, put up on YouTube or take all these videos and publicize them either. That's not the intent. The intent is, if it's public, it should be public under the existing law, we'll release it. Otherwise, this isn't to embarrass either the police officer or the pedestrian or motorist that we tape. We go into a lot of domestics. We go to a lot of calls in the homes of people. That's their private sanctity. And we're not going to be embarrassing anyone and publicizing. I know there's an appetite to look at these films, and most of them will not be publicized, because that's not the reason for us to be capturing this. Both in when we make a mistake or when there's a training issue, we're not looking to embarrass anyone. We're looking to improve, and also looking for documentation. It's the best evidence, whether it's a drunk driving case, whether it's an assault case, or a disorderly conduct. Once you have film and audio, your case is wrapped.
Yeah.
And that's what we find, really important with these body cams.
Steve, we're getting close to our half hour, so let me get a couple things on one.
Sure.
What's the, in your opinion, the police union's position on the CSA?
So at the beginning, they weren't quite sure what it does and what it doesn't do. There was some backlash most recently. I've spoken to the president of the union. Most recently, as Friday, we spent over an hour walking through everything. They have some concerns, and they're agreeable, and we'll be sitting at the table with our oversight committee that the council passed in the coming weeks. They just have some concerns, whether it's, you know, interpreting what the language means and what the additional responsibility on the officers are, and so it's a learning process for them. You know, they've taken a position they don't support it at that point, but they have always said they support the CSA. It's just they have concerns, and perhaps some of the language can be changed so it clarifies what the intent of that language is. So, not speaking for the union, I think they're okay. They just want a seat at the table.
So, do you believe that there's room for compromise and subsequent passage of this thing?
I do.
Very good. Major, I don't know that you haven't gotten totally involved with it, but you'll be comfortable with it?
I think, like the commissioner stated, there's some concerns. I want to make sure that once it's finalized, that it serves the city of Providence, its residents, and the police department that is so proud to serve in the city.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, I'll tell you what, a half hour goes by real fast.
It does.
And we've run out of time, but I want to thank today's guests, Commissioner Pare, Major Perez, and you, the viewers, for tuning in to another segment of In Another Opinion. A special thanks to Rhode Island PBS for making this program possible. I'm your host, Peter Wells. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at inanotheropinion@gmail.com, and have a good day.
The Rhode Island Foundation, partnering with passionate Rhode Islanders to lead, transform, and inspire our state. Learn more at rhodeislandfoundation.org.